Traditional Greenland Inuit diets derive somewhere between 34 and 41% of total calories from protein, with carbohydrates contributing as little as 10% in the absence of imported foods. These numbers are startling by conventional nutritional standards. Modern dietary guidelines typically suggest protein should represent 10 to 35% of calories, with carbohydrates often recommended at 45 to 65%. The Inuit sat at the extreme edge of what the scientific literature considers viable, and yet these populations thrived across millennia in one of the most physiologically demanding environments on Earth. What this record establishes is not that everyone should eat this way, but that human metabolism is more flexible than conventional dietary frameworks tend to acknowledge. The physiological adaptation that made this possible is worth understanding. When protein intake is very high and carbohydrate intake is very low, the body must obtain glucose through gluconeogenesis, the synthesis of glucose from amino acids, glycerol, and lactate in the liver. This is an energy-expensive process, but it's also one the human body is fully capable of sustaining over the long term. What prevents high protein intake from becoming toxic is the parallel adequacy of dietary fat. Protein poisoning, sometimes called rabbit starvation in historical accounts of explorers who tried to survive on lean meat alone, occurs when protein calories are very high but fat intake is insufficient to buffer the nitrogen load on the kidneys and liver. The Inuit avoided this because their protein sources were inherently fat-rich. Seal, whale, and fatty fish provided fat alongside protein in proportions the body could safely manage. This is a crucial point for anyone considering high-protein dietary approaches today. Stripping fat from protein sources, as the low-fat dietary movement of the 1980s and 1990s encouraged, creates an imbalance that the traditional Arctic diet never experienced. Chicken breast without skin, ultra-lean beef, and fat-free dairy represent a nutritional pattern that has no ancestral precedent in high-protein cultures. The Inuit record suggests that protein and fat work as a metabolic team, and artificially separating them creates problems the original diet never had. That said, a clear caution is warranted about applying the Arctic protein blueprint uncritically. The Inuit were physically active in ways that most modern people are not. Hunting required sustained exertion in extreme cold, covering miles on foot and by kayak. High physical activity increases nitrogen clearance efficiency and provides metabolic demand for elevated protein. Sedentary individuals consuming 40% of calories from protein face a different metabolic reality than an Arctic hunter. There are also concerns about long-term kidney stress at very high protein intakes, particularly for individuals with pre-existing renal conditions. Bone density effects of very high protein diets remain debated in the literature. The practical takeaway is more moderate than the Inuit extreme, increasing protein intake to 25 to 30% of calories, pairing protein with adequate fat, choosing whole food sources over processed protein products, and calibrating intake to actual activity level. The Arctic record proves the concept is physiologically sustainable. It doesn't prove it's universally optimal for every metabolic context.